All right, welcome everybody to this Head of Remote podcast series. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and company doing great things remotely. Today on the line, all the way from California, Chris Dyer, a company culture expert, an author, a speaker. You've been doing this work for ages. I mean, since I can remember being around. And so I'm very excited to talk to you today about this position of Head of Remote. And I think what I'll start with is, what do you see? What is a head of remote in your opinion?
So the head of a remote really should be the energy and the kind of like spiritual guide of the organization as it relates to what does it mean to be remote? Because what a lot of companies don't understand is that being operating remote is different. How an employee, is going to manage their time, what are their expectations? Like there's all these rules and all of these things that can happen when we have a remote company, if we're doing it the right way, we're being really smart about it. And so like you kind of need somebody who's watching over this, because it's so easy for some managers to come in and be like, yeah, but I do command and control and I need everyone on the phone, or in the office all at the same time, or I have all these arbitrary rules in my brain because that's how I was raised, or that's the last 5 jobs I had. And that's not what the company at the senior level it has understood remote work to be. But they have maybe said, remote for us is this, and we need to make sure that some other managers and teams aren't kind of operating in a way that's against that vision. And organizations have a different interpretation of remote. Like I know what I think works, and I'm sure you know what you think works, but like ultimately they're going to do it the way they think it works for them. And so what are those rules? What are those guardrails that a head of remote might be able to kind of do? And then beyond that, I think the second part is their job to be the trainers, to be the monitors of, do we have the right things in place, the right processes, the right equipment? I could give you a story about like how the wrong equipment almost cost me one of my best employees,
Oh,
right?
yes, please.
So I didn't have a head of remote, like I was kind of the head of remote, and we had brought this person on, and she came highly recommended. We poached her from a competitor. I mean, she was top of the top, great reputation. She comes in the organization, we get her trained, we get her going, nicest lady in the world, and she sucks. She's terrible. And I'm like, how is this possible? And I have my people coming back to me going, we made a mistake, we need to fire her, like this is not right. And I go, my spidey sense is going off, like something's not right here. Like I said, hey everyone, if she's the wrong person and we made a mistake, that's on us, we'll figure that out. But can we just go back to the very beginning and start over again? And just make sure, do everything again, like check the training, check everything. Because I said, I feel like something's wrong here. We don't usually screw up like this. Maybe it was my own ego going, we don't screw up like this. That has to be something else. But we still went back and double checked. And in the checklist, we went, her direct manager discovered that we had never bought her a second monitor. And in her job, she literally has to have like 32 windows open at all times. Like they're doing research and they're popping around. And to be efficient, they have to have all these different windows open all the time to do research on all these different core websites and different places. She was doing it all on one 14-inch laptop.
Yikes.
And not happy about it, never complained, never raised her hand and said, hey, this isn't working for me. She just thought, well, this is the crappy equipment I get from my company, and I'm expected to do a great job, and I'm going to try my best because I just left this other company for this new company. And we discovered we had never given her the equipment that she needed. The moment we got her that correct monitor, her productivity skyrocketed. She was the #1 employee in her department. She had the top performance and was great. And it was a huge lesson for us. And we went back and like talked about it openly with everybody, how we screwed up. Also, what are the ways that we could have made her feel more comfortable to raise her hand and to say, maybe this isn't right, or I need help, or I need a piece of equipment, or I need some other resource to do better. And honestly, I feel like that's where a head of remote would have done really well to have done that deep dive before we started saying, let's fire this person.
Right, right, right. Because there's somebody just paying attention to all the details that somebody as a remote worker would need. So that's a one good reason for the following question, because my next question was why a separate position for this? Like, why not have this be in the COO or the HR area?
Yeah, I mean, so listen, it could be that person based on the size of your organization, but that person better have an incredible amount, a deep knowledge about remote work, have done remote work, right? Understand the challenges of different remote work employees. You can't just say, hey, head of HR, who has done all this incredible work to be certified and work with all, inside of their they may have a master's of HR. They may have gone to Sherm and done all the classes and all the certifications, but like there isn't one for remote. I mean, there isn't like typically it's something that they would get certified in. It does feel like an experience-based position at this moment in time that you really had better know and had really understood what it takes. So and that's like one part experience in remote, one part experience with like lean and scrum and agile and like all these different things that we might be using in this context. Do you understand how to asynchronously work really well and what that looks like? I mean, there's very specific tools and ways to make that's not just diarrhea into the Slack channel when you're done. That's not necessarily asynchronous work and just tell them everything you did. Like there's ways for us to collaborate that's really effective. Do you know how to do that stuff? Do you know how to train people to do that stuff? So typically a CEO or CEO or head of HR, I don't think that's their expertise. I don't think that's their focus. And the problem is that they have so much to do. They have so many important things to do. I think adding this on, I mean, if it's a team of 5, okay, maybe. But like if you're talking about an organization with any significant amount of people, a head of remote feels like something that will save them an incredible amount of money because you're not
Right.
going to lose people. You're going to have way better productivity. And I can give you some examples of like little small things that we had to consistently do and remind people of every single month in order to keep our productivity high and our mental health high for people. And even though it was a known thing, if we didn't remind them and we didn't practice with them and we didn't nudge them to keep doing these things that are good for them, they would go back into their old behaviors and their old traffic.
Wow. So there was a constant need for reminders. So I love what you're saying that the separate position, you're right. Somebody could take that role, but unless you have expertise in the role, and you can see people that have expertise from a mile away if you're someone with expertise, right? Like when I first was interviewing people way back in the day and I would get somebody on a video call, you can see in an instant if they're used to being on video, if they're comfortable on video. It's just the way they move and speak and behave and the setup, the whole thing. So you're right. That expertise really comes in handy. And I think it's a good reminder that it's a new medium of work. It's not, it's like radio and television. They're both broadcast mediums, but this is a different medium. And so there is an expertise that's needed in that medium. So what do you think then are the overarching responsibilities then? I mean, we've talked about rules and guardrails, the trainers, infrastructure. I mean, those sounds like a lot already. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you'd add to that?
Meetings. Meetings are
Meetings.
where remote work and culture goes to die.
Brilliant.
Right? I mean, if you have bad meetings, you have bad culture, and you got bad meetings, remote work, suddenly everyone goes, oh, remote work isn't working and our culture is bad. No, your meetings suck,
Yeah.
right? You're terrible at meetings. And so someone needs to be checking in with employees and looking at the data and talking about how our meetings are going every month and maybe reporting up to some senior level people and saying, hey, we've got teams where they're consistently going over the 30 minutes. Like we're telling people to show up for a 30-minute meeting, they're consistently going over, which pushes into their time. We are asking people to work outside of their hours, respond outside of their hours. Like we're doing this stuff that's going to be driving them crazy. And we need to do better. And here's how we do better. So we used to do a meeting every single month. Every team had to do this meeting once per month for 30 minutes. And it is a fake meeting. And so usually people ask me, why in the world, with as many meetings as you might have in a company, why would you have a fake meeting? And the reason we did the fake meeting was it was practice. I don't, for anyone who's ever played sports, or played an instrument, you spend all of your time practicing, and you spend very little time actually performing in a moment when you need to be as close to perfect as possible. But you practice and practice and practice. And in business, we do the total opposite. We don't practice at all. We just throw people in and expect them to be perfect over and over and over and over again, right? In this sort of like high pressure setting. So
Yeah.
we would kind of go back and we would practice a meeting. And we would say, for the next 30 minutes, here's an imaginary topic. We call this a tsunami planning meeting. Imagine we doubled in size. Imagine we lost our biggest client. Imagine Chris got hit by a bus and stuck in a coma for a month. What happens? What do we do? How do we handle this? And we just had this like imaginary, really big, imagine a tsunami hits you, right? What would you do? This huge event. And what's cool is that people feel free to give their ideas, and they feel a lot more liberated to sort of talk, because no one's going to say, okay, now it's your job to go fix it, or that's a great idea, you're in. This is all fake. We all know it's fake. And when we're done with the 30 minutes, we're going to go back to our lives. And so we practice creativity, we practice ideas, we practice listening to each other. And the manager also gets an incredible glimpse in this imaginary setting of who is bad at meetings and who is good at meetings, who is talking too much, who's interrupting people, who's not listening, who's not raising their hand and being heard, who needs help with that, right? Who's maybe a very introverted or very new employee and doesn't feel comfortable disagreeing or giving their opinion, feeling pressure to agree with the group, all these different little like psychological battles that are happening all day long inside of meetings. This is this incredible moment for the manager to go, oh, Bob needs to shut up and Janie needs help getting her voice heard. How do I fix that in the next month? Because I've observed this now in this fake meeting. Because I don't have to worry about deliverables and what was really going to happen. Because we all go to the meeting, we figure out what we got to do, and we're thinking about ourselves, and then we run off to go do our thing.
Right.
We don't think about how do I help the rest of the people in the meeting. So I could see a head of remote running that meeting every single month for the team, and then being able to do a little bit of meeting maintenance to really help them be more effective, so that the next time they go to a real meeting, it's effective. And we stay on time, and we start on time, and we don't talk over each other. We really listen, and we decide what actually needs to happen after this meeting so that it doesn't just disappear into the void of work, right? So those are some real concrete things the head of remote could do.
Oh, I love it. What about personality traits? So what kind of person is this? Right? Like, I guess, I mean, curiosity comes to mind, like somebody who's really genuinely curious about things, because you're going to have to go out and find, or maybe, so, I mean, maybe someone who could stand up to the CEO and say like, no, actually your people don't need any more pizza parties. They need second monitors or third monitors, like, what do you see as something, an essential personality trait?
Yeah, so there's definitely some things I would think about. I'm always cautious in throwing all these out, because I'm afraid people will hear it and go, well, I'm only 4 of those things and not 6 of those things.
Right. When you actually look at a whole list of these kind of things, like nobody's everything. You'd be a superhero, right? Yeah, indeed.
So if you feel like you're a few of these things, I think it's good, and then you can work on the rest, right? But yeah, be curious, be a lifelong learner, be a good listener, be someone who's a coach and a trainer. Like, that's your natural thing. You like to do that. I mean, you're okay with doing the same training 392 times, because it's going to make an impact on the company. You're going to go back and keep working with people, have to keep repeating the same things. And that's okay for you, because there's a benefit in the long run to that. To your point, the ability to speak senior leader, to be able to, effectively communicate to them when they're looking at a spreadsheet and saying, well, this row E doesn't look good, we need to go make a bunch of changes. And you go, okay, that's cool, but the kind of changes we need to make need to ultimately help our employees be more effective, not just change our little spreadsheet number to look better. Because there's some great ways to do that. So those are hard conversations to have going up, and then those are different than the conversations happening here. So the way I like to phrase this is there is vertical leadership and there is horizontal leadership. Vertical leadership is what we typically think about. I'm your boss and I manage the people below me. That's vertical leadership. And if you're a very good boss, people love you, and you're always thought about as a good boss, we know those people, you're probably a good listener, you're probably all those things I just talked about. And you also don't treat people like children, and you don't pat them on the head and say, oh, what a good job you did. I mean, you're genuinely appreciative of the work they did. You understand when they have a problem in their life or something happens, or they have a sick spouse or a parent, and you immediately jump in and say, I can help you. I'll take some of that load off of you. Go and do what you need to do. And as opposed to, you need to work more hours, or I'm going to call you at 9 o'clock at night because I need an answer to something. That's not good, right? That's a good vertical leader. But we also notice that people get promoted in the organization and they move up, and you think, well, they must be kissing butt, or they must know somebody, or they're not a very good leader with their team. Their people don't really like them, but they keep getting promoted. Why is that? Because they're very good at horizontal leadership. They're very good at managing the people at their level, and maybe even a level above them. Meaning they're able to get projects done and relate and talk to people. If they're a director, they can work with all the other directors really, really well. It might be the world's worst boss to their people on a vertical level, but they know how to work on a team at a flat level or one step above. And so if the best leaders, those who become CEOs or very high level, senior level people, they tend to be really good at both.
Mm.
And I think this is this glaringly, hugely missed concept for leaders. They come in and they think, I need to be really good at managing my people. Well, yes. I also got to be good at, if you're good at you're in a big company, you had better learn how to get your projects done and play the politics and work your magic at your level, because there's a lot of scarce resources and people trying to get what they want too, and how do you manage all of that? So that's something where a head of remote should be good at both of those things. That would probably be my number one is, could I find someone who has demonstrated in the past that they can work with people below them in a healthy and collaborative way, but also navigate the people at that same level, or else they're not going to be effective at all.
Right. Yeah. And that's a special kind of expertise to have. Not everybody can do that. It's like, a person who's really good at both sales and programming. Those are two specialized skills that are not usually in the same person. And every once in a while you get a unicorn. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit like that. You've got to have, there's a certain knowledge of how to lead people, and there's a certain knowledge for how to lead with people, sort of that has to go in there. So that's a special one. What about, for someone, we're coming up on or we're almost coming up on our timer. What about when you're first starting as a head of remote? Somebody's coming into the organization. What are the things? What do they do when they first start? How do you come in? I'm assuming you assess the situation somehow, but where do you look as a head of remote? What's the first thing you would do coming into an organization?
I would try to talk to as many people as I could and do my best to shut up and listen. And I would ask certain questions like, what's working? What do we do well? What do you like? Right? I want to start with the positive. I want to make sure we capture the essence of why this organization is existing today and what's working. What I don't want to do is come in and say, I'm the expert and I've written books and I've done these things and this is how we're going to do it. And immediately they're going to feel defensive. I want to know what's working. What do they like? Then there's sort of this other little trick question you can ask, and then you can say, but tell me what you love about the company, or what do you love about your boss, or what do you love about your team? And they will typically tell you things that they love. And that's a little different than what's working, right? Sounds like the same question. It's not. What do you love? Because if I asked you, what do you love about this restaurant? And you might say, well, they have this great special and there's a waiter who's really great and treats me well. But ultimately, and almost every time I ask that question, someone says, but I do wish
Oh,
they had more specials. I do wish it wasn't so noisy in that restaurant. I do wish, and it's a really interesting way to get them to kind of tell you something they're not happy with without ever asking them to complain or ever telling them you want to know what's bad. I notice when I say, what do you love? People always counter it. It's like they feel anchored to not be too much love, and they kind of want to like balance it out a little bit. And they will tell you some of the little secret things that they didn't want to tell you they don't really love so much about the company or about their team, whatever it is.
right, right. Like, oh, I love, except that I don't love so much. I love this except for this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's like your partner. I love him so much except for this one thing, the toothpaste tube or whatever, drives
Exactly.
people crazy.
I love my spouse, except for the clothes on the floor. The long list. Yeah. Exactly. But for some reason our brains want to like keep this equilibrium of
Right.
being like somehow it's evened out. It's just okay. And so, but the really important thing is to find out what's working and to make sure you really understand what at a good, from a good perspective. I mean, I have consulted in some really toxic companies and some really terrible teams and really horrible places that I would never want to work, where they brought me in to try to figure out what's going on. And there was still great answers. There were still great things happening there and
Yeah.
things that people didn't want to lose. There was just a lot of other crap we had to fix, but at its essence, they wouldn't have still been there if they didn't like some part of it. It wasn't some good,
Right.
right? And maybe it's the clients, or maybe it's the projects they get done, maybe it's the impact they make, but they don't like their boss and they don't like that their budgets are terrible. I mean, there's all these other things that they don't like. So that's what I would do. I would want to really understand what makes the organization and the people tick, and why they're there and what they like, and take that and build on it and say, what I'm hearing from everyone is they really appreciate how transparent the organization is. They always know what's going on. They feel like they're, but it looks like here we have this other problem. So how do we do more of this? How do we expand that, which is something the company is good at and feels good about, and then let it bleed into some of the other areas where we're not so good. But we use that as our lens or as our language for that change that we need to do. That always works better than, hey, I went back and talked to everyone, we really suck at this thing. Now we need to go fix it.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Plus,
yeah.
you're so focused on the negative. And in this, I like what you're saying here is you're really focusing on a positive outcome and expanding the positive as to
Mhm.
sort of overtake some of the negative aspects or as a way to solve some of the
Right.
negative aspects. I really like that. I'm writing all
Then we
these.
ask, how would we change? How would we expand what we're doing? And that's called the dream phase. So we sort of dream about what we want it to be, how we want tomorrow to be different. And then we need to discover how that could actually happen. We need to then figure out how to really make that destiny. This is an appreciative inquiry model
Mhm.
that we use a 4D model. And so there's a real way to do this. No, but we need to know what we're working with, and then we know what the dream is. I don't know. We're in pretty good shape. I want to go climb that mountain. Okay, but how do I climb that mountain? I need maybe friends, or I need equipment, or I need food, or I need water. I mean, you got to figure out, what do I need? And then, okay, what else should I do? Oh, I should probably start training and practicing and getting ready and, making sure I can go climb that mountain. And then how do I actually make it happen? So, this is a really healthy thought process. Whereas most companies go, that sucks, let's change it, fire the manager. Here's this brand new thing that the CEO happened to read about in a magazine while sitting in first class on Delta this weekend. And now suddenly we're doing that. Like,
Right.
that's not the way to do it.
Right. Right. And I love that. I love where it starts to talk to everyone. Talk
Yeah.
to everyone. Where do you go when you need help with your challenges? Who do you talk to? Is there a community online? Are there LinkedIn groups? Who's your source of helpful guides?
I've been really fortunate to have a lot of people that are those people for me. So it depends. Like when I was running a company, I had a CEO group that I really leaned on, that I met with every single month. And we talked about everything, from business stuff to personal stuff to things with our kids and grandkids and spouses. And, it was everything that we were dealing with as human beings in that group and that confidential type group. I think going and finding mentors is huge. I would not be here. I would not have ever achieved any of the things that I've been able to achieve without mentors.
Mm.
So go find wickedly smart people who are successful, who also are willing to take you under their wing and teach you things and answer your stupid questions and, share their wisdom and be there for you. Or sometimes it's just, I call a mentor, like, I'm so frustrated.
Right.
And for them to say, yeah, I've been there like 19 times. And here, let me pick one for you and I'll tell you what I did and how I got through it. And I remember when I sold my company, I called my mentor who had sold her company. And she said, I have some good news and bad news for you. So, okay. She goes, the good news is the money's in the bank. So you did good. She said, bad news, I won't use the exact language she used, but she said, you're going to be screwed for the next 6 months. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm happy. I sold my company. Everything's great. And she's like, no, you're going to be totally lost and screwed for the next 6 months. And she's like, call me back in 6 months and there's nothing to do but sit in your pity and wallow. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is nuts. No way. Oh, okay. And we hung up and she was right. All of my routines, all of my habits, all the people I talked to, everything I was used to doing for 20 plus years was gone. And I was a total wreck. Walked around the house with didn't know what to do with myself. I was doing consulting, I was doing speaking, but like my everyday energy was gone. And I had to figure out what I was going to do now with all my energy, my time, and my habits and my things. And I had to figure all that out. And 6 months later, I called her back and I was like, man, were you right? This was crazy. All right.
Right. I can imagine it's like people when they first retire, it's a little bit of a shock. Like, the days are really long. There's a lot of time to fill.
A lot of people go back to work after they retire. They go get another job, they start volunteering, or a lot of them die if they don't do that because they don't have any purpose. They don't have something to do.
Yeah.
And so it was huge. So, I mean, in that moment, a mentor really was there for me and helped me figure out, for me to have known in advance that I was going to go through this, made it easier to go through. So I wasn't suffering needlessly and wondering,
what's wrong with me, or
wrong with me, my week, or my whatever. Yeah.
right.
It's like, no, all your habits have been destroyed. You don't realize how many times you go into a system and check a report and look at a thing and always talk to this person and have coffee with this person on Tuesday and do this. That was all gone.
Yeah. All that overhead also that fills the brain. Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh.
Yeah, good. So I love that. So like a CEO group or just a group of people that are in similar positions or doing things. So that seems good. And then mentors, really, like you said, wickedly smart people who can really show you the way. I have the same experience. Indeed, it is really good to be around. It's like being around like Jimi Hendrix or something, like these people that have done it before and they're like really good at their craft, and it's kind of inspirational just to like watch them play a little bit. That's always nice to have around. I can imagine.
So one time I would say it's really important for people to remember that that's who they need to get their work and professional advice from. Your friends are there to be your friends and to go have a beer and to do whatever it is you do socially. Your friends are terrible at giving you business advice. They're terrible at professional advice. Do not listen to your friends about professional advice that unless they happen to be like in your industry and are also colleagues, like you said, also at your level. Most of them give terrible, but they mean well. Man, do they mean well, but they don't understand what it is that you're dealing with or going through. Use them for other things, right? It's like you tell all your problems to your friends and they give you terrible advice, and then people rarely ever go to a psychologist to tell them their problems, who will actually give you really good advice.
Right.
Be very careful about who you get your advice from. That was something I learned very early on. It made all the difference in the world.
I think that is brilliant because indeed friends are really good friends, but your day, your office job, people are not going to understand you as a CEO or an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, whatever it is, however different you are, you're right. They're not going to understand, not because they don't want to, just because they're not in that position. They simply can't be in that context. I remember when I toured with the band, trying to tell people what it was like to be on a road with a band, it was impossible because they're like, well, why didn't you just text? And you're like, you don't understand being on the road. It's all consuming. It's like you can't be that. You don't understand unless you're there.
Yeah.
So indeed, I love it. Great
In a few
advice.
bands, I know exactly what you mean. It's insanity. It's like, will the drummer be here on time? Will the lead singer go crazy today?
Right. Will
What's
they remember their guitars?
right? Will the promoter even know that we're coming? And then like, will the show even happen? Like, it is insanity on the ride. Yeah.
I miss it and I don't miss it. That's how it is. I love it. Chris, thank you so much for all your tips. I mean, I took copious notes today and I'm going to add all of this to the quick start guide. Thank you so much for all of the advice that you gave. I really appreciate it.
Well, and thank you for all of your leadership and remote work all these years. It's been fantastic to watch you, and you've been a great resource to me and everybody else too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And for everybody listening, stay powerful.